he makes his way up to the capsule, some 90 feet above. At 9:33 a.m. on May 5th, 1961, Freedom 7, piloted by Alan Shepard, sits awaiting liftoff from Cape Canaveral.
1 minute and counting.
Mission Control assesses the conditions, checking and rechecking the Mercury data, weather readings, and communication systems while monitoring Shepard's physiological state. The world's press and TV stand by.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, lift off and the clock is started. Yes, sir, reading you loud and clear.
Despite the fact that Yuri Gagarin of the Soviet Union had just become the first man in space only 23 days earlier, the event is watched eagerly by the American people. As Shepard reaches space at an altitude of 116.5 miles at a maximum speed of 5,180 miles per hour, his name becomes recorded in history. Just 11 days earlier, an attempt to orbit a mechanical astronaut ended in disaster when it was destroyed only 40 seconds after liftoff.
What a beautiful view.
This time, the mission is proving to be a success for the Mercury team. 15 minutes and 22 seconds later, the Mercury capsule splashes down 302 miles downrange. The recovery teams repeat their well-rehearsed procedure. Shepard and capsule are plucked from the ocean. Information and personal data from Shepard will be recorded and used for future Mercury missions. Within minutes, Shepard receives a well done from the President on behalf of the people of the United States. Freedom 7 brings the success that NASA desperately needs, but it's small consolation to many Americans who are aware of the accomplishment of the Soviet Union and its world-leading technology. America's space program still has far to go. Project Mercury continues with the launch of Liberty Bell 7 on July 21, 1961. Piloted by Virgil "Gus" Grissom, the mission almost ends in disaster when, after landing, the capsule's hatch blows off prematurely. It sinks to the bottom of the Atlantic, nearly drowning Grissom in the process. Project Mercury needs success. Only 7 months later, in February 1962, another Mercury spacecraft, Friendship 7, sits ready for liftoff. Mission objective is to place a man into a stable Earth orbit, observe his reactions to the space environment, and return him to Earth. After 3 years of training, John H. Glenn Jr. is ready for takeoff. Married and father of 2 teenagers, Glenn is a veteran of 2 wars. A pilot for over half of his 40 years, he is a lieutenant colonel of the United States Marine Corps and a test pilot. Only 5 years earlier, he established a transcontinental flight record, becoming the first man to average supersonic speeds across America. While technicians prepare Glenn for his incredible journey, Mercury stations worldwide plan for Friendship 7's flight. At the Mercury Control Center, the flight controllers rehearse the decisions that will govern the course of the mission. Tracking stations across the globe will monitor and communicate with Friendship 7 as it passes overhead. Their recordings will be invaluable for the bolder space ventures already in preparation. At the heart of the worldwide Mercury operation is the Communication and Computing Center. Based in Greenbelt, Maryland, the Goddard Space Flight Center houses the systems that will decide whether the mission should continue or be aborted. It will determine the locations of the spacecraft and convey vital information to Cape Canaveral. Back at base, the press begins to gather. John Glenn is making his final preparations. He begins his short trip to the launch pad. 40,000 other men and women's skills and years of preparation, research, and training have been utilized to reach this day. How will man and technology function in the hostile environment of space? On the pad, the Mercury Atlas launch vehicle stands alone. 112 tons of rocket, with thrust equal to 3.5 million horsepower, just to hurtle 168 pounds of astronaut into space. As Glenn bids his farewells, Mission Control begins its final countdown.
Godspeed, John Glenn. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
At 9:47 a.m., Friendship 7 is propelled into the sky. Glenn begins his historic mission to orbit the Earth, a feat never before attempted. The world marvels at the brilliance of this effort to conquer the unknown. Glenn passes through the Earth's atmosphere and begins one of 3 orbits around the Earth. Mission Control asks Glenn if he is able to see a greeting from Perth, Australia.
The lights show up very well, and thank everybody for turning them on, will you?
Back at Mission Control, computer analysis shows problems with Glenn's heat shield.
I still have some of these particles that I cannot identify coming around the capsule occasionally, over.
Contrary to Glenn's own readouts, it's evident that Friendship 7's heat protection is loose. The debris Glenn is seeing confirms he could perish in a searing inferno when he plunges back into the atmosphere. The retro rockets which slow the spacecraft and head it back to Earth are strapped over this shield. If they are left on after retro fire instead of being jettisoned as in normal re-entry, then the straps might hold the heat shield in place, and this might save Glenn from the 3,000 degrees of re-entry heat. The decision must be made soon. Glenn is instructed to override his systems, and the retro pack is not released as the capsule reaches 17,500 miles an hour during the re-entry phase. Although unaware of the situation, Glenn is surprised with what he can see through the tiny window of his capsule.
This is Friendship 7, a real fireball outside. 7 is escape. Do you read, over?
A barrier of ionization prevents any verbal communication with Friendship 7. The forces of gravity slam against Glenn until he weighs 8 times his normal weight. Finally, the tiny capsule splashes down. The United States destroyer Noah is waiting to recover it. 88 minutes and 29 seconds after liftoff, John Glenn has completed his 81,000-mile journey. He is transported to an aircraft carrier under the splendor of his 4th sunset of the day. Project Mercury has accomplished all that was hoped for. Glenn enters the history books and the hearts of the American people. By the middle of the 1960s, Project Gemini is launched. a vital transition program between Mercury and Apollo. Gemini, a two-man capsule, must have the ability